Ah! A short, piercing scream tore through the chaos, violently yanking me back to the world of the living. Not the cold, hard impact of a fall, it was a hospital. It's a delivery bed. Awake, a woman's voice devoid of warmth sounded above my head. A nurse wearing a mask was adjusting the speed of the foredrip, her movements efficient to the point of indifference. The anesthesia has worn off. Pain is normal. Just bear with it. A miscarriage still requires postpartum care. Don't take it lightly. She glanced at me, her eyes empty of emotion, as if stating the most mundane fact. Miscarriage. The word seared into my heart like a red-hot iron. The pain suddenly became excruciatingly clear, merging with the icy agony of being pushed off a high-rise in my past life, shattering every bone in my body. A violent wave of nausea surged in my stomach, and I abruptly turned my head to retch into the chipped enamel basin by the bed, only to spit out a few mouthfuls of bitter, acidic fluid. At that moment, the pale green wooden door of the ward was gently pushed open. A tall, straight figure blocked the light from the doorway, stepping in with a chill from the outdoors. His dark green military uniform was impeccably pressed, and the star insignia on his shoulder straps, denoting his rank as battalion commander, gleamed coldly under the fluorescent light. It was Ezra Gu. In his hands, he held an equally chipped enamel mug, steam rising in wisps, blurring the sharp lines of his jaw. He walked to the bedside with light steps, placing the mug on the small nightstand with a faint clink. "Good to see you awake," he said, his voice deep and steady, carrying the characteristic composure of a soldier, yet tinged with a barely detectable weariness. He leaned down slightly, as if about to reach out and check my forehead. I instinctively recoiled violently, my back slamming heavily against the cold iron bed rail with a dull thud. The movement tugged at the wound on my abdomen, and the sharp pain made me gasp instantly, a fine layer of cold sweat breaking out on my forehead. Ezra Gu's hand froze mid-air, his thick, dark eyebrows furrowing almost imperceptibly. He withdrew his hand, his gaze sweeping over my deathly pale, sweat-covered face before finally settling on the cup of steaming brown sugar water. "Drink something warm," he said, picking up the enamel mug and handing it to me. His tone softened further, yet carried an undeniable, almost commanding reassurance. "Warm yourself up." The reddish-brown liquid sloshed inside the white enamel, emitting a sickly sweet aroma. My gaze bypassed that nauseating cup of sugar water, locking onto Ezra Gu's face. That face, handsome, resolute, had once been the entirety of my youthful radiance, but now, every sharp angle reflected with cruel clarity the foolishness and blood-soaked tears of my past life. It was his repeated consideration. It was his ever-struggling widowed sister-in-law Lena Liu, who ultimately pushed me into the abyss. In my past life, it was on this very hospital bed that I endured the heart-wrenching pain and the despair of losing my child, drinking the cup of sugar water he personally handed to me, only to hear him say those words with earnest gravity. "Myra." Ezra Gu's voice indeed rang out, low and carrying his usual attempt at patient reasoning. Each word was like a poisoned ice needle, precisely piercing my already battered heart. "I know you're hurting. The child is gone. I'm in pain too, but Sister Lena, she's a widow with a child. It's only been a few months since Jejune passed. She was just flustered today and lost her balance, accidentally bumping into you." His voice paused, as if carefully choosing his words, his gaze locking onto me with an invisible pressure, demanding that I consider the bigger picture. "She's a woman raising a child all on her own. It's really not easy. You, try to be more understanding, don't make a scene, all right?" Understanding, what? In her past life, when Lena Liu pushed her off the building, that face twisted with jealousy and hatred, Ezra Gu's eyes that unhesitatingly chose to believe Lena's tearful lies, and now, this cup of brown sugar water reeking of hypocritical sweetness, along with his words about how hard it's been for Lena Liu. Boom! The thread of reason in her mind, overwhelmed by towering hatred and icy despair, snapped instantly. All the pretense, all the restraint, all the grievances and resentments accumulated from past lives were ignited in this moment, burning into a blaze that consumed everything. Consideration. I abruptly raised my head, my voice hoarse as if sandpaper were grating, yet sharp as ice, piercing straight at Ezra Gu, Battalion Commander Gu. What exactly do you want me to consider? That she accidentally caused me to lose my 3-month-old child, or that because she's a widow with a child, she can rightfully steal my man and take over my home? My voice suddenly rose sharply, like a chipped blade scraping out a harsh noise in the deathly silent ward. The patient and their family in the next bed held their breath in shock, and even the nurse paused her work, staring at us in astonishment. Ezra Gu's face darkened instantly, as if covered in frost. He clearly hadn't expected me, usually docile, even somewhat timid, to suddenly erupt. Nor had he anticipated that I would so bluntly and sharply tear off that veil of decency. His jaw tightened, and his eyes turned sharp and cold in an instant, exuding the authority of a military man. Myra Lynn, watch your words. What nonsense about stealing a man and taking over a home? Lena is a woman of impeccable integrity, pure and blameless. It sounded like the most absurd joke in the world to me. A hoarse, broken laugh escaped my throat, yet tears streamed uncontrollably down my face, mingling with cold sweat in a wretched mess. If Lena Liu were truly blameless, she wouldn't be wandering around the living room in your shirt in the middle of the night. She wouldn't have deliberately knocked over the chicken soup I spent all afternoon making, scalding herself, only to turn around and cry over Jejun's portrait for you to see. She wouldn't have whispered in your ear every day while I was pregnant, lamenting how pitiful Jejun was without a father and how cruel the stepmother, was. I spat out every word in one breath, each syllable dripping with bloody accusations and the venom of a past life. The hospital room was so silent you could hear a pin drop, save for my ragged breathing. Ezra Gu's face turned ashen, his eyes churning with shock, offended fury, and a trace of something almost imperceptibly flustered. He took a sudden step forward, his towering frame radiating an overwhelming pressure, his voice barely containing thunderous rage. Myra Lynn, have you lost your mind? Shut up. How dare you spout such nonsense? Do you even realize? I don't. I cut him off sharply, my gaze like a poisoned dagger, meeting his furious stare without flinching. All I know is that my child is gone. Murdered by your poor, struggling sister-in-law, and you, the father, are standing here asking me to show her sympathy. Ezra Gu, where is your heart? Did a dog eat it, or has it swollen from soaking in Lena Liu's crocodile tears? You, Ezra Gu trembled with rage at my direct address and scathing accusations. Veins bulging at his temples, he abruptly raised his hand, as if to stop my hysterics. At the moment his palm lifted, the last trace of warmth in my eyes extinguished completely. Enough. To waste even one more second entangled with such scum would be a desecration of life itself. All the anger, accusations, and resentment collapsed and solidified in an instant under the weight of extreme hatred, turning into a deathly, icy silence. I didn't even glance at him again. My right hand suddenly shot up, swift as lightning, and seized the plastic 4 tube on the back of my left hand. Without the slightest hesitation, my nails dug deep into my flesh as I yanked it out with all my strength. Thud, the needle was yanked out of the blue vein, dragging a string of tiny blood droplets behind it. A distinct red dot instantly appeared on the back of the hand, from which a crimson bead of blood quickly welled up. It trickled down the pale wrist and dripped onto the pristine white bedsheet, blooming into a small, glaring red plum blossom. The sharp pain struck, yet it was nothing compared to the agony in my heart, not even 1/10,000th of it. Ezra Gu's pupils contracted violently in shock at my sudden action, his hand frozen mid-air. I gave him no time to react. With my left hand, I flung aside the thin, disinfectant-scented blanket covering me, and the frigid air instantly enveloped my body. Clad only in a flimsy hospital gown, the excruciating pain in my abdomen felt like a steel blade twisting inside, and my legs were so weak they could barely hold me up. Gritting my teeth, the metallic taste of blood heavy on my tongue, I forced myself to move off the cold metal bed, fueled by a hatred that burned everything to ashes. My feet stepped onto the icy terrazzo floor, the biting cold shooting straight from my soles to the crown of my head. My body swayed uncontrollably for a moment. Myra Lynn, what are you doing? Ezra Gu finally snapped out of it, growling as he reached out to steady me. Get away. I violently slapped aside his outstretched hand with such force that I staggered myself, my voice hoarse and icy. Like a frigid wind howling from the depths of hell, my gaze locked onto the pocket on the left breast of his military uniform, where a Hero brand fountain pen, his treasured possession, was clipped. It was a gift from the old regimental commander after he distinguished himself in service. Without the slightest hesitation, I extended my right hand, still trembling and stained with my own blood, and with all my strength, thrust it fiercely toward the pocket on his chest. Ezra Gu had not anticipated my sudden attack at all. Caught off guard, I managed to grab the cap of that fountain pen. His face darkened instantly as he instinctively tried to shield it. Too late, I yanked it out with all my strength. Rip, with a faint sound of tearing fabric. The hefty Hero brand fountain pen was forcibly pulled from his pocket. Clutched tightly in my hand along with it was a neatly folded, slightly worn piece of paper. The divorce petition I had painstakingly written stroke by stroke under the dim kerosene lamp 2 nights ago, enduring the dull ache in my stomach. Every single word on it was soaked in the blood and tears of my past life. Ezra Gu felt a sudden chill on his chest. He looked down at the torn slit in his military uniform pocket, then raised his head in shock and fury. "Myra Lynn, have you lost your mind? Give me back my pen." I completely ignored his furious roar. My body ached so badly it nearly convulsed, and cold sweat soaked through the hospital gown on my back. I bit down hard on my lower lip, the metallic taste of blood flooding my mouth. Relying on the clarity that the blood brought, I mustered all my strength to stand firm. Then, under the shocked and furious gaze of Ezra Gu and the stunned stares from the neighboring hospital bed, I raised my hand, a hand stained with blood, clutching a pen and the divorce papers, lifted high. With every last ounce of strength I had left, fueled by the hatred of a past life shattered to pieces and the icy resolve of this one, I slammed it down, hard, mercilessly, onto the star insignia on Ezra Gu's chest, the symbol of his battalion commander's glory. Snap! A crisp yet dull impact sound exploded in the deathly silent hospital room. The cold metal epaulette dug painfully into my palm. The hard cap of the Hero fountain pen, separated only by the thin sheet of divorce papers, struck heavily against the gleaming star insignia. Ezra Gu's tall frame was jolted by this sudden, forceful slap, causing him to stagger half a step back involuntarily. All the fury on his face instantly froze, transforming into blank astonishment as he stared at me in disbelief. As if seeing this frail, pale woman before him for the very first time, I gasped for breath, waves of excruciating pain surging from my lower abdomen, my vision flickering black, yet I straightened my spine. Though it trembled slightly from the agony, I lifted my head, meeting his shocked gaze with an expressionless face, cold as stagnant water. My lips quivered from blood loss and pain, but my voice came out clear, each word enunciated like an ice-coated nail. Ezra Gu, D.I., Vorse. I pressed the crumpled, blood-stained divorce report, still damp with the blood from my palm, forcefully and resolutely onto his cold epaulette, as if driving it into his very bones and flesh. This child. My gaze swept over my flat yet still excruciatingly painful abdomen, where a tiny life had once grown, now leaving only a cold void and bone-deep hatred. My voice suddenly rose, carrying a sharpness that was almost cruel and a mocking tone of relief. "Consider it, my debt repaid for taking care of your home." As the words fell, I abruptly withdrew my hand, clutching the cold Hero fountain pen tightly in my palm, my knuckles turning white from the force. Without another glance at the mix of shock, fury, and a trace of bewilderment on Ezra Gu's face, I turned around, leaning against the icy wall. I moved step by step, my body racked with pain and resolve, toward the hospital room door. The thin hospital gown clung to my back, soaked in cold sweat, outlining my bony shoulder blades like the broken wings of a butterfly. Behind me, there was a deathly silence. Only my labored, suppressed breaths and the shuffling sound of slippers against the floor remained. Ezra Gu stood rigidly in place, the torn fabric of his military uniform pocket dangling limply on his chest, The star insignia on his shoulder seemed to still bear the faint imprint of paper and a glaring, ominous dark red stain. He lowered his head to look at the crumpled sheet of paper forcibly stuffed into the seam of his shoulder insignia. The words divorce report on it burned like a red-hot brand, searing his eyes with pain. He abruptly raised his head, staring at the frail figure leaning against the wall and struggling toward the door. A surge of overwhelming, indignant fury and an inexplicable panic seized him in an instant. How dare she? How could she be so resolute? This must be anger talking. A reckless outburst after the loss of their child, Myra Lynn, he growled, like an enraged lion, taking a swift step forward. His large hand, with an unyielding force, suddenly clamped onto my arm. That hand was like an iron vice, instantly tightening around my slender arm, nearly crushing the bone. The immense strength, carrying his usual domineering possessiveness, sought to forcibly wrench me back. "Have you had enough?" His voice, barely containing thunderous rage, exploded in my ear, his scorching breath hitting the side of my neck, carrying the heavy scent of gunpowder and tobacco mixed together. "Go back and lie down. Divorce. Do you even know what nonsense you're spouting?" The excruciating pain in my arm and the cramping agony in my lower abdomen intertwined, plunging my vision into sudden darkness, nearly making me faint. The humiliation from my past life, being comforted by him time and again, repeatedly asked to understand, surged over me like a tidal wave, ultimately transforming into the boundless coldness of that fatal fall. Hatred, a torrent of hatred, like erupting magma, instantly overwhelmed all physical pain. "Let go," I ground out the words through clenched teeth, my voice hoarse and icy, carrying the ferocity of a dying beast. I didn't turn around, only struggled violently, using every ounce of strength to break free from his grip. "Ezra Gu, you fucking let her go right now." A thunderous roar suddenly erupted from the doorway of the hospital room. A man dressed in a faded work uniform, built like an iron tower, charged in like an enraged bull. His eyes bloodshot. It was Lin Daeong, my only blood brother. He had just gotten off the night shift at the factory and rushed over in a panic after receiving a neighbor's urgent message. The moment he entered, he was met with a sight that made his vision blur with rage. His younger sister, who had just lost her child, was being held like a helpless chick by that high-and-lying battalion commander brother-in-law, her face as pale as paper, swaying unsteadily. Lin Daeong's roar was like a sudden clap of thunder, shaking the entire hospital room. Without wasting a single word, he closed the distance in 2 strides, his massive hand like a fan swinging through the air with a whoosh, delivering a brutal punch straight at the arm Ezra Gu was using to grip me. His movements were swift and ruthless, carrying the raw, unyielding ferocity of a working-class man protecting his own at all costs. Bang! A dull thud of flesh striking flesh resounded. Ezra Gu, being a soldier, reacted with lightning speed. The moment Lin Daeong's fist came crashing down, he instinctively released his grip on me, raising his arm to block and deflect most of the force. However, Lin Daeong's furious strike was powerful and heavy. Caught off guard, Ezra Gu's arm still went numb from the impact, and his tall frame staggered backward involuntarily. Seizing this split-second opportunity, I twisted free like a slippery fish, breaking the last of my restraints. Completely off balance, I collapsed limply backward. Myra, Lin Daeong acted swiftly, no longer paying attention to Ezra Gu. In a flash, he stepped forward and caught me firmly with his broad, sturdy chest and arms. A familiar scent, mingled with the smell of machine oil and sweat, enveloped me. It was the scent of my big brother. In my past life, when I was cornered by Lena Liu, it was my brother who secretly slipped me the food coupons and a few dollars he had saved, urging me to run. But in the end, I didn't escape. What happened to my brother afterward? I don't seem to remember. An overwhelming surge of sorrow and the grievance of having narrowly escaped death rushed up my nose, blurring my vision. I clutched the rough fabric of my brother's work shirt desperately, as if grasping the last floating piece of driftwood, my throat emitting stifled, broken sobs. "Don't be afraid, I'm here, I'm here." Lin Daeong held me tightly. Feeling the violent tremors of his sister's frail body and her suppressed cries, his heart nearly breaking, he suddenly looked up, his bloodshot eyes like two red-hot knives, glaring fiercely at Ezra Gu, who stood a few steps away with a livid face. His voice was hoarse and distorted with rage. Gu, are you even human? My sister just went through such a terrible ordeal. She lost the baby. Instead of protecting her, you're laying hands on her. Is this how you use those military medals of yours? To bully the women in your own home? Ezra Gu's face was so dark it seemed to drip with gloom. He rubbed his aching arm, still throbbing from Lin Dayong's blow, the cold, hard gleam of the stars on his epaulets flickering under the light. His gaze shifted between his wife, trembling yet icy-eyed, shielded in Lin Dayong's arms, and his brother-in-law, now a furious lion protecting his sister. A suffocating frustration and unspent rage churned violently in his chest. I didn't lay a hand on her. Ezra Gu's voice was restrained, carrying the cold rigidity of a soldier and a trace of frustration at being wronged. She pulled out the 4-needle and tried to run away herself. What do you mean just? Lin Daong didn't even let him explain, standing like an immovable wall in front of me, his eyes blazing with fury. Just held her. Bullshit. Battalion Commander Gu. Look at my sister's wrist, look at the blood on her hand, and look at her face. His anger grew with every word, his chest heaving violently. What did my sister marry you for? Her, for your high rank, for your fat allowance. She worked herself to the bone taking care of your household, serving that poor, struggling, widowed sister-in-law of yours. Now she's lost the baby, almost lost her life, and you're still here telling her to be considerate of others. Considerate my ass, Ezra Gu. Has your conscience been eaten by dogs? Lin Dayong's roar was like a rapid-fire cannon, each word striking Ezra Gu in the face and weighing heavily on the hearts of everyone in the ward. The glances from the neighboring patient and their family toward Ezra Gu shifted, now filled with disdain and pity. Ezra Gu's face flushed and paled in turns, veins throbbing at his temples. He clenched his fists. His military pride made it unbearable to endure such public accusations, especially the charge that he had mistreated his wife. He wanted to argue, to say he had never mistreated Myra Lin, that he had provided her with a comfortable life, in his view, that he had only wished for family harmony, hoped she could understand the difficulties of Sister Lena. But when his gaze met the cold, hollow eyes of the person in Lin Dayong's arms, eyes brimming with deep-seated hatred and detachment, all his words of defense stuck in his throat. Those eyes were like bottomless icy pools, swirling with emotions utterly foreign to him, sending an inexplicable chill through his heart. Just then, a deliberately hushed, tearful female voice sounded at the ward door, carrying just the right note of fragility and distress. Ezra, Myra, what's going on? I heard Myra woke up, so I specially made some millet porridge and brought it over. It's Lena Liu. She was wearing a slightly worn floral-patterned cotton jacket, her hair neatly combed, her face bearing just the right amount of concern and pallor. Holding an aluminum lunchbox in her hand, she stood timidly at the doorway, her gaze sweeping over the tense atmosphere in the hospital room before finally settling on Ezra Gu. Her eyes instantly reddened, her voice trembling with emotion. Ezra, are you okay? It's all my fault. If I hadn't lost my balance this morning, none of this would have. Sister-in-law. Ezra Gu seemed to have found his anchor. Or perhaps was eager to escape the awkward situation, immediately cutting off Lena Liu's self-reproach. His voice softened unconsciously. It's not your fault, it was an accident. He took a step forward as if to take the lunchbox from her. Wu Xin. I suddenly lifted my head from where I had been silently curled up in my elder brother's arms. My voice was soft, even weak, yet it pierced through the false warmth in the hospital room like a needle dipped in ice. Instantly, all eyes turned to me. I stared at Lena Liu's face, so full of innocence and self-reproach, at the fleeting glint of triumph and calculation deep in her eyes. In my past life, it was this very face, forever fragile and helpless in front of Ezra Gu, yet venomous as a viper in front of me. It was her who personally pushed me off the rooftop. A cold hatred, like poisonous vines, instantly coiled around my heart, squeezing until I could barely breathe. Lena Liu, I looked at her. The corners of my mouth slowly curling into a frosty arc. There was not a trace of warmth in that smile, only bone-chilling mockery and an icy clarity that saw through everything. Behind the memorial frame of your son Jejun, that roll of grain coupons tied with a red string, along with $5. Was it the allowance Ezra Gu sent last month for my health? My voice wasn't loud, but it struck like a thunderbolt, instantly crashing down upon Lena Liu's head. The worry and pallor on her face vanished in an instant, replaced by an ashen, deathly white. Her hand holding the lunchbox jerked violently, and the aluminum container clattered to the ground, spilling scalding millet porridge that splashed onto her feet. Like a cat whose tail had been stepped on, she shrieked, "You're lying. You're slandering me." "I didn't, Ezra, she's framing me." Her reaction was too intense, too abnormal, instantly betraying her guilt. Ezra Gu's outstretched hand froze mid-air as he reached for the lunchbox. He whipped his head around, staring in shock at Lena Liu, who had just screamed inappropriately, then turned to me with disbelief. Food stamps, allowances, the money and coupons he sent home every month. Myra Lin had never once said they weren't enough. Could it be? An utterly absurd yet spine-chilling thought rose uncontrollably in his mind. Am I falsely accusing her? A simple search will prove it. I leaned weakly against my brother, my voice frail but my gaze sharp as a blade, locked onto Lena Liu's face, twisted with terror. Underneath the cabinet by the Kang in your bedroom, in that biscuit tin wrapped in red paper, besides the food stamps, there's also a Plum Blossom brand watch. That was my mother's dowry gift to me. Lena Liu, do you dare let someone search for it? Bang! Lena Liu seemed to have all the strength drained from her body, her legs gave way, and she collapsed into the spilled porridge, trembling violently as if sieved, her lips quivering without uttering a single word. Only a hoarse, death-rattle-like gasp escaped her throat. The sheer terror and despair in her eyes betrayed her completely. The evidence is irrefutable. The ward was deathly silent, with only the heavy, desperate gasps of Lena Liu breaking the stillness. Ezra Gu stood frozen like a petrified statue. His gaze shifted from Lena Liu, collapsed on the floor with a face drained of color, to the frail yet piercingly cold-eyed wife in my brother's arms, who seemed to see through everything. The insignia on his chest felt icy and unyielding, while the edges of the divorce papers he clutched unconsciously dug painfully into his palm. All the understanding, all the hardships, in this moment, were torn apart, revealing the most vile and ugly schemes beneath. Lin Daong tightened his embrace around me, glaring at Lena Liu, who was slumped on the floor, and Ezra Gu, standing rigidly. Through clenched teeth, he let out a heavy, disdainful snort. "Pa, what a bunch of trash." Without another glance at them, he carefully supported me, as if shielding a fragile treasure, his voice softening to a whisper. "Myra, Big Brother will take you away. We're not staying in this damned place any longer." I nodded weakly, burying my face in the crook of my brother's shoulder, which carried the faint scent of machine oil, and closed my eyes in exhaustion. My body ached numbly, but my heart was eerily calm, frozen in icy stillness. Ezra Gu stood rooted to the spot, watching helplessly as Lin Daong half-supported, half-carried me, step by step, struggling yet resolute, out of the hospital room. That frail silhouette vanished into the light and shadow at the doorway, like a decisive line drawn in the sand. He lowered his head and opened his palm. In the palm of his hand lay the crumpled divorce report, stained with a faint, dark red, and a cold, metallic star insignia backplate, still carrying the lingering warmth from her fingertips. The force of that desperate slap had actually dislodged it from the shoulder strap, the icy metal pressed against his palm, its chill piercing to the bone. Outside the window, the leaden-grey sky of late autumn 1983 hung heavily over the city. Lin Daong pedaled his clunky old bicycle, the kind that rattled everywhere except the bell, with me perched carefully on the back seat, cushioned by the thick cotton jacket he had stubbornly insisted on taking off, still warm with his sweat. We jolted along the potholed factory road. We didn't return to that nauseating military family compound reeking of Lena Liu's presence. Instead, we went straight to the shabby, low-lying residential area behind the cotton mill. This was Lin Daong's home, A small red brick house no more than a dozen square meters, its walls blackened by coal smoke, with stacks of honeycomb briquettes and chopped firewood piled by the door. "Myra, we're home, watch your step." Lin Daong parked the bike and lifted me off the back seat with a gentleness so cautious it bordered on clumsiness, as if handling a porcelain doll that might shatter at the slightest touch. The room was cramped but tidy. An old wooden bed, a chipped square table, 2 stools. The air carried a faint mix of coal smoke and the scent of a man living alone. Pungent, yet oddly comforting in its own way. "Bro, I'll stay here, sis-in-law." I leaned against the headboard, wrapped in the old patched but clean quilt my elder brother had dug out. My voice weak. "Don't mention her." Lin Daong was squatting by the stove, poking at the fire, his tone brusque as he spoke without turning his head. "Divorced that gold-digging woman long ago. This place is just me now, nice and quiet. You stay here and focus on getting better, that's what matters." The flames leaped up, orange and lively under his prodding, driving away the late autumn chill. He didn't press for details about the hospital. Nor did he mention Ezra Gu or Lena Liu. Silently, he stoked the fire, then rummaged through the cabinets, pulling out half a bag of noodles, 2 eggs, and a small lump of lard, hardened in a tin can. "Make do with this for now. I'll see if I can get some meat from the store tomorrow." He placed a bowl of clear noodle soup before me, topped with a poached egg and glistening with oil. His rough fingers fidgeted awkwardly against his faded work pants. The steam from the noodles made my eyes sting with unshed tears. In my past life, when Ezra Gu demanded that I be considerate of Lena Liu, forcing me to huddle by a cold stove chewing on stale buns. Did my elder brother also worry about his hopeless little sister from some forgotten corner? "Brother," my throat tightened painfully. "Eat." Lin Daong shoved the chopsticks into my hand with an air of finality. "Don't think about anything else. If the sky falls, your brother will hold it up for you." The days flowed slowly and laboriously, marked by the crackling of the stove fire and the rising steam from the noodles, while the physical wounds gradually healed. The gaping hole torn ruthlessly in my heart let in an unending, icy wind that howled day and night. During the day, Lin Daong sweated profusely in the machine repair workshop, and after work, he would bury himself in the kitchen, clumsily figuring out how to turn the limited ration coupons into something nutritious. Somehow, he managed to get a small packet of brown sugar and would unfailingly make me a bowl of it every day. He also asked his co-workers to exchange eggs for him on the black market several times, but he never ate a single one himself. Instead, he buried them all at the bottom of my bowl. Once I could move a little, I began tidying up the small room. At the very bottom of a dusty, old wooden crate stuffed with newspapers and miscellaneous items, I found a small, heavy bundle wrapped in blue cloth. Unwrapping the blue cloth revealed several old books with yellowed pages and dog-eared corners. The one on top was * self-study series for mathematics, physics, and chemistry, high school edition, *. Beneath it lay a thin copy of * the Barefoot Doctor Manual * and a stack of neatly cut, hemp thread-bound blank papers, their edges already yellowed and brittle. As my fingertips brushed over the familiar rough texture of the paper, my heart felt as if it were being squeezed by an icy hand. In my past life, during countless nights when I endured Lena Liu's cruelty and Ezra Gu's neglect. In the cold, unwelcoming room of the military family compound, ostensibly the home of Battalion Commander Gu's wife, but more like a servant's quarters, these secretly hidden old books and notes had been my only solace and escape. How I had longed to stand on my own, like the women in white coats described in those books, relying on my own skills. But that faint spark was ultimately extinguished by the identity and responsibilities of being Mrs. Gu, by Lena Liu's endless harassment, and by Ezra Gu's repeated reassurances to just stay at home and rest easy. Between the pages of the book lay a palm-sized old photograph. The girl in the picture wore a faded blue cotton jacket, her 2 jet black braids tied neatly, standing beneath the old locust tree at County No. 1 High School. Her smile was shy yet radiant, her eyes brimming with hope for the future. That was 17-year-old Myra Lin, who had just received her high school admission letter. On the back of the photo, 2 lines of delicate yet forceful handwriting in fountain pen read, knowledge changes destiny. Myra Lynn, you must go out into the world. Tears surged without warning, large drops falling onto the yellowed photograph, leaving dark, spreading stains. Get out, the path I couldn't take in my past life. This time, even if I have to crawl, I'll crawl my way out. I pressed the photo tightly to my chest. The cold tears trickled into the corners of my mouth, bitter and astringent. Yet they seemed to inject one last surge of strength into my parched soul. Brother, I said that evening, as Lin Daeong chewed on his cornbread with pickles, pointing at the old books on the table. My voice was calm but carried an undeniable force. Help me dig these out, I want to read them. Lin Daeong froze for a moment, glancing at the tattered books and then at my pale yet resolute face. A flicker of something complex passed through his clouded eyes. He didn't ask why. Just gave a firm nod and stuffed the last bite of cornbread into his mouth. All right, tomorrow, I'll clean up the table nice and bright for you. The difficulty of reviewing far exceeded my expectations. My body hadn't fully recovered yet, and prolonged sitting caused a dull ache in my lower abdomen. The living conditions in the cotton mills residential area were rudimentary, with unstable voltage causing the dim yellow light bulb to flicker constantly, in the depths of winter. The only source of warmth in the room was a coal stove. Sitting at the desk to study, my hands and feet would grow numb from the cold, forcing me to place a hot water bottle on my knees for warmth. My knowledge had become terrifyingly rusty: high school algebra formulas, chemical equations, physical theorems. After more than a decade of hardship in my previous life, they had all blurred into a chaotic haze. Opening the textbooks, those once familiar symbols and words now seemed alien and impenetrable, but I had no way back. The glow from the stove illuminated the open books and my focused profile. The pencil scratched across the rough draft paper as I worked through calculations repeatedly, only to start over again and again. When stuck on a problem, I would frown deeply, my lips pressed together until they turned pale, persisting late into the night. When exhaustion overwhelmed me, I would splash cold water on my face or pinch my thigh hard. Lin Daeong didn't understand these things, but he silently supported me. He borrowed a few old reference books from the factory library through acquaintances. He unraveled the work gloves issued by the factory and knitted me a pair of fingerless wool gloves. He saved money from his cigarette expenses and occasionally went to the black market to exchange for a small packet of white sugar, which he dissolved in water for me to drink, saying it would nourish my brain. Time slipped quietly through winter and spring amid the scratching of my pen and the howling north wind outside the window. In the scorching heat of July, the day of the college entrance exams finally arrived. The exam venue was set at City No. 1 High School. Lin Daeong took a day off specifically, waking up before dawn to pedal me over 10 miles on his rickety bicycle, dressed in his best, faded blue work uniform. He stood like a silent mountain under the scorching shade of the trees outside the exam hall. As the final bell of the last exam rang, I followed the crowd out of the examination hall, the glaring sunlight making it hard to keep my eyes open. Lin Daeong immediately rushed up to me, his dark, sweat-covered face filled with tension. "Myra, how was it? Are you tired? Did you do okay?" Looking at the wrinkles on his forehead soaked with sweat, at the pure, unadulterated concern and anxiety in his eyes, my nerves, strained for days, suddenly relaxed. An overwhelming exhaustion and an indescribable bitterness welled up in my heart. I shook my head slightly, my voice hoarse from not speaking for a long time and carrying a barely detectable sob. "Bro, I did my best." What followed was a long and agonizing wait. One early August day, the incessant cicada chirps were grating on my nerves. I was sitting on a small stool by the door, reading my dog-eared copy of the Barefoot Doctor's Manual in the daylight, when Lin Daeong burst in like a whirlwind, drenched in sweat, clutching a pale yellow sheet of paper, his face twisted with overwhelming excitement. His voice cracked and trembled uncontrollably. Myra, a letter. The letter has arrived, with a big red seal. The capital, it's from the capital." My heart skipped a beat, then began pounding so violently it ached in my chest. I sprang to my feet, and the manual fell to the ground with a thud. Lin Daeong rushed up to me, thrusting the letter into my hands. His thick fingers trembled as they pointed to the bright red sender's stamp at the bottom right corner of the envelope. Look, look, Capital Medical University, Department of Clinical Medicine. It's an admission letter, Myra, my dear girl. You got in. You got in. The pale yellow envelope felt heavy in my hand. Emblazoned on it were the solemn school emblem and the bold characters spelling out Capital Medical University. In the lower right corner, the bright red words admission notice and the official seal burned like a flame against my fingertips. My fingers trembled so much I could barely hold the thin envelope. Taking a deep breath, I mustered all my strength to tear it open and pull out the notice inside, which bore the same bright red emblem and lettering, Student Myra Lynn. After review and approval, you have been admitted to the Clinical Medicine Department of our university. The words that followed blurred and wavered in my vision. An overwhelming, indescribable surge of heat rushed to my head, drowning all my senses. In my ears, Lin Dayoung's ecstatic, incoherent shouts mingled with the deafening sound of my own heartbeat. Everything before me began to spin, and the sunlight grew unbearably bright. The howling wind when I was pushed off the building in my past life, the brown sugar water brought by Ezra Gu in the hospital, the hypocritical tears of Lena Liu, the dried noodles handed to me by my elder brother's rough palms, the rustling sound of my frozen fingers scribbling calculations on draft paper in the cold winter nights. Countless fragments of memories flashed and collided before my eyes like shards. Brother, I opened my mouth, wanting to say something. But my throat felt blocked by a searing iron, unable to utter a sound. The icy pillar of hatred and resentment that had supported me for an entire year within my body crumbled in that instant. Darkness enveloped my vision, and the world spun wildly. Myra. The last moment before losing consciousness was Lin Dayoung's terrified cry, and his solid, warm embrace that carried the scent of sweat and engine oil. Provincial City, Military District Auditorium. The brilliantly lit auditorium was as bright as day. A massive red banner hung above the stage, warmly celebrating the complete success of the XX Military District Summer Competition and Commendation Ceremony. Below, rows of officers in crisp military uniforms, adorned with various ranks, sat solemnly and proudly. Ezra Gu sat in the middle of the front row, the stars on his epaulets gleaming under the lights, as the outstanding battalion commander of the armored unit in this major competition. He had just received the third-class merit medal and certificate from the senior officer. Thunderous applause erupted, and camera flashes lit up the room. He stood up, saluting the entire audience with a crisp military gesture, his posture as straight as a pine tree, his face bearing the calm and restrained pride unique to a soldier. As the assembly neared its end, the atmosphere relaxed. A staff member from the military district's propaganda department, carrying a stack of freshly arrived newspapers, cheerfully distributed them to the leaders in the front row. Commander, Political Commissar, the latest provincial newspaper is here. The front page headline is about a major celebration in our province. The old political commissar chuckled as he took the newspaper and unfolded it. His eyes habitually scanned the bold headline on the front page, and his smile faltered slightly before transforming into unmistakable surprise and admiration. Oh, this is remarkable. This year's provincial top scorer in the science stream of the college entrance exam has been announced, and it's a young woman. Her total score, this high, impressive, truly impressive, and she's heading to Capital Medical University, a future angel in white. The old political commissar's voice boomed with genuine praise. His words immediately caught the attention of several senior officers nearby, who gathered around to take a look. Is that so? Let me see. Myra Lynn. That name sounds somewhat familiar. A deputy commander adjusted his glasses. Myra Lynn, Zhao Mingda, the regiment's political commissar sitting next to Ezra Gu, subconsciously repeated the name, then suddenly remembered something. His expression turning peculiar as he quickly glanced at Ezra Gu beside him. Ezra Gu, who had been basking in the joy of his achievements and the relaxation of the meeting nearing its end, felt his heart clench violently as if gripped by an invisible hand the moment he heard the name Myra Lynn. Impossible, it must just be someone with the same name. How could she? a housewife who didn't even finish middle school. Possibly, he almost forced himself to maintain a calm exterior, yet his gaze involuntarily, with a hint of barely perceptible urgency, drifted toward the old political commissar's newspaper, on the front page of the provincial newspaper. A somewhat grainy black and white photo occupied a prominent position. The girl in the photo wore a faded floral-patterned shirt, her hair tied in a simple ponytail, her face was lean but sharply defined, her eyes calmly meeting the camera's lens, with a faint, almost imperceptible smile at the corners of her lips, a serenity that seemed to pierce through the dust of time. Beneath the photo, a bold, black headline stood out, "From humble origins to excellence, our province's top science student. Myra Lynn gains admission to Capital Medical University with outstanding results." Subtitle: Textile mill worker rises from adversity, pens a new chapter of destiny. Myra Lynn, it's really her. Ezra Gu felt as if all the blood in his body had frozen in an instant. The joy of his achievement and the glory of the assembly shattered like fragile glass under this sudden blow. He stared fixedly at the black and white photograph, at those calm, almost unfamiliar eyes. That face bore the familiar contours he knew, yet it felt so alien, stripped of the docility and timidity from his memories. All that remained was a rock-like resilience and an icy detachment. A female textile worker, reborn from adversity, top science student, Capital Medical University. Each word struck like a heavy hammer, shattering his perception that Myra Lynn, whom he had asked to be considerate of others, whom he believed couldn't survive without him. That Myra Lynn whom he had tacitly allowed Lena Liu to bully time and again, only for her to resolutely demand a divorce from her sickbed. An overwhelming sense of absurdity and an indescribable panic surged over him like icy tides, drowning him instantly. He felt his breath halt. The laughter and applause of the senior officers around him seemed muffled and distant, as if separated by a thick pane of frosted glass. Only the calm face in the newspaper and those cold, printed words remained vividly imprinted on his retinas, searing his nerves. The commendation ceremony concluded amidst the stirring strains of military music. Officers congratulated one another and filed out of the auditorium in small groups, the atmosphere buzzing with excitement. Ezra Gu sat like a soulless statue, rigid in his chair, clutching the third-class merit certificate so tightly that his knuckles turned white, its edges crumpled under his grip. The provincial newspaper had been quietly slipped into his hand by political commissar Zhao Mingde. Battalion Commander Gu. Zhao Mingde's voice sounded beside him, laced with a hint of complicated sigh. "Is this really your wife? The divorce, is it finalized?" Ezra Gu snapped back to reality, his throat so parched he couldn't utter a single syllable. Wife, divorce. The words rang bitterly ironic in his ears. He rose almost clumsily to his feet, grabbed the newspaper, and without even a word of farewell, stumbled out of the clamorous auditorium. Outside, the summer night breeze carried the lingering heat of the day, yet it brought him no warmth, only a bone-chilling cold. He didn't know how he made it back to the barracks, nor how he ended up sitting at his cold desk, trembling hands dialing the number of the public phone in the cotton mill's residential area over and over. The endless busy tone was like a dull knife soaring through flesh. Finally, after who knows how many attempts, the call connected. A gruff male voice with a thick local accent came through. "Hello, who are you looking for?" "I'm looking for Myra Lynn." "Myra Lynn from the cotton mill." Ezra Gu's voice was hoarse and urgent. "Myra Lynn." The man on the other end paused. "Oh, that Myra Lynn who got into university, she's long gone. She's a golden phoenix that's flown to the highest branch now, went off to study in the capital, left days ago." Click. The receiver slipped from Ezra Gu's hand and landed heavily on the desk. Capital Medical University. The provincial newspaper bearing her photo felt like a red-hot branding iron, searing his heart. The person he had so easily abandoned, the one he assumed would always remain waiting, had already flown away without a backward glance, soaring to heights he could never reach or even imagine. An unprecedented, immense emptiness and panic seized him. It was as if the solid ground beneath his feet had suddenly collapsed, revealing a bottomless void. "No," he abruptly stood up. his eyes surging with a near-delusional madness. He couldn't lose her like this. He had to go find her. She must just be acting out of spite. In her heart, she must still care for him. This thought, like a lifeline, instantly seized all his reason. The leave request was submitted at lightning speed, with a flimsy excuse. Regimental Political Commissar Zhao Mingde looked at his usually reliable subordinate, now with bloodshot eyes and clearly in an abnormal state, hesitated to speak, but ultimately sighed and signed off on the report. 2 days later, Ezra Gu stood at the grand, time-honored gates of Capital Medical University. Covered in the dust of travel, he had changed out of his military uniform into a slightly worn grey Zhongshan suit, trying to make himself less conspicuous. Yet his soldierly posture and the unshakable air of sternness between his brows still made him stand out starkly against the scholarly surroundings. His fists were clenched, palms slick with cold sweat. The carefully folded newspaper clipping tucked in his inner pocket felt like a branding iron. Searing his heart with anxiety, he kept imagining the scene of meeting Myra Lin. Would she be surprised to see him after his long journey? Would she be resentful? Would she, like before, throw herself into his arms? He rehearsed his apologies over and over in his mind, even preparing explanations about Lena Liu and promises of a better future. Time crawled by in agonizing slowness as he waited. The setting sun cast a golden edge over the ancient university gates, stretching Ezra Gu's solitary figure into a long shadow. At last, as the final streak of sunset was about to sink below the horizon, several figures emerged from the school gate. Among them was a slender, tall figure dressed in a simple white shirt and dark blue trousers, carrying a faded canvas backpack. She was tilting her head slightly, engaged in a quiet conversation with a bespectacled, scholarly-looking middle-aged man beside her. It was Myra Lin. Ezra Gu's heart leaped into his throat, almost instinctively. He straightened his back and took a step forward, ready to call out the name that had lingered on the tip of his tongue countless times. Yet, in the next moment, he caught a clear glimpse of Myra Lin's face. The soft, yellowish glow of the streetlights gently illuminated the scene. Her face had grown noticeably thinner, shedding the last traces of youthful innocence from his memory, its contours now clear and delicate. Her complexion was a bookish pallor, untouched by sunlight for far too long. What startled him most was her gaze, calm, profound, like the undisturbed surface of an autumn lake. There was none of the surprise, grievance, or resentment he had anticipated, not even the slightest ripple. She looked at him as if he were a tree by the roadside, a stone, or a complete stranger. She was slightly tilting her head, listening intently to the middle-aged scholar beside her, her lips even curving into a faint, polite, and attentive smile. That serene, absorbed demeanor was something Ezra Gu had never seen in her before. It was as though her entire being was immersed in a world he could neither comprehend nor reach. A chilling cold surged from the soles of his feet, spreading through his entire body, shattering all his preconceptions and rehearsed words into fragments. Myra Lin. The words tore from his throat almost instinctively, his voice hoarse and strained, laced with an urgency and panic he hadn't even realized he felt. Under the halo of the streetlight, Myra Lin's footsteps came to a halt. She turned her head toward the sound. The dim yellow light cast faint shadows on her face, clearly revealing her expression. Calm, only an unfathomable calm. Those eyes, once brimming with his presence, now clearly reflected Ezra Gu's travel-worn and slightly disheveled figure, yet not a single ripple was stirred. The bespectacled scholar beside her also stopped, glancing at Ezra Gu with some confusion before turning to look at Myra Lin. Ezra Gu felt a pang of unease under the gaze of those tranquil eyes. He instinctively straightened his posture, trying to reclaim a sense of control. His Adam's apple bobbed with difficulty as he spoke in a low, hurried voice, carrying an undeniable tone of command yet betraying a barely perceptible tremor. "Come home with me." Under the dim streetlight, Ezra Gu's figure cast a long shadow on the mottled ground. His slightly worn Zhongshan suit couldn't conceal the straight posture of a soldier. Yet his shoulders seemed slightly weighed down by an invisible burden. Standing at the school gate, he resembled an abrupt boundary marker, blocking the path to the Temple of Knowledge. "Come home with me." for words. Hoarse, urgent, carrying the exhaustion of a 1,000-mile journey, yet also bearing the unyielding authority ingrained in his bones, as if this were merely the finale of a farce, and now that he had arrived, she should obediently set everything aside and follow. Myra Lynn's footsteps barely faltered, not even a crack appearing in her expression. Her deep, pool-like eyes clearly reflected Ezra Gu's figure, yet it was as if she were looking at a roadside stone. Utterly unmoved, she didn't even glance at his outstretched hand, calloused with faint traces of labor. Her gaze swept past him calmly, as though he were nothing but air. Then, with perfect naturalness, she turned slightly toward the bespectacled, scholarly middle-aged man beside her. Her voice was neither loud nor soft, but steady and clear, carrying an air of complete focus and just the right measure of politeness. Professor Ju, regarding the critical value issue in the serum separation of the experimental control group you mentioned earlier, I reviewed several sets of data again last night and noticed a slight time difference variable between the 3rd and 7th groups during the separation process. It might have a potential impact on the significance of the results. The data logbook is in my bag. Would you prefer to review it together in the lab now, or should I compile a summary and leave it on your desk first thing tomorrow morning? Her speech was steady, her articulation clear, and the professional terms she mentioned left Ezra Gu completely baffled. The focused immersion, the natural thirst for knowledge she displayed when facing her mentor, formed the cruelest contrast with the icy indifference she showed when looking at him. Professor Ju was clearly also taken aback by the sudden go-home command, but he was quickly drawn in by the professional question Myra Lynn raised. Adjusting his glasses, a glimmer of approval flashed in his eyes. "Oh, time lag variables, you're very observant, Myra Lynn. Now, well." He instinctively glanced at his wristwatch, then stole a look at Ezra Gu, who stood frozen under the streetlight with a livid expression, seeming somewhat awkward. "It's a bit late now, the lab building. Data waits for no one, Professor." Myra Lynn's voice remained calm, yet carried an undeniable insistence. Especially subtle variables like these, they could directly impact the credibility of the entire experimental model. "I can have a preliminary analysis ready tonight." As she spoke, she was already unzipping her canvas backpack, preparing to pull out her notebook. She completely ignored Ezra Gu's presence, treating him like nothing more than an inconvenient nuisance. A surge of anger from being utterly scorned and the agony of being gnawed by immense panic, like two venomous snakes, instantly coiled tightly around Ezra Gu's heart. He watched Myra Lynn, completely absorbed in academic matters, not even sparing him a glance, and saw the focused expression she directed at that so-called professor. The image of her docile and forbearing face from their past life clashed violently in his mind with her current icy, frosty profile. Myra Lynn. Ezra Gu suddenly took a step forward, his tall figure exuding an overwhelming sense of pressure, almost blocking their path. His crimson eyes bore into her, his voice hoarse and distorted by extreme emotion, carrying a hint of desperation on the verge of losing control and a last shred of forced authority. "I'm talking to you. Come back with me. Whatever it is, we'll discuss it at home." He had finally torn off that facade of forced calm, revealing the anxiety beneath. And a barely perceptible plea. Myra Lynn finally, truly, looked at him. The gaze was so calm it sent a chill through the heart. She slowly, ever so slightly furrowed her brows, as if pondering an insignificant obstacle. Then, she spoke with utter detachment, her voice not loud but sharp as an ice-forged blade, cleanly slicing through the dim yellow of the night. "Comrade Commander." She even used that title which once signified his glory, now leaving only the cold irony of distance. "Excuse me." She turned slightly, her arm moving with natural, protective grace to lightly steady the somewhat flustered Professor Ju beside her, a gesture both smooth and polite. "I'm rushing to finish the experimental data." As her words fell, she didn't spare Ezra Gu another glance. As if he were merely an insignificant obstacle by the roadside, supporting Professor Ju, the two of them effortlessly sidestepped his rigid form, walking with composed steps toward the brightly lit laboratory building. The sound of high heels striking the ground was crisp, steady, each tap like an icy drumbeat, pounding heavily on Ezra Gu's already battered heart. She was gone, right in front of him. She supported another man and walked away without even looking back, all for some damned experimental data. A massive, overwhelming panic of being utterly abandoned and a furious rage that crushed all his dignity surged over Ezra Gu like a tsunami. The dam of reason completely collapsed. Myra Lynn, stop right there. He let out a beast-like growl, his crimson eyes fixed solely on that resolute retreating figure. His body reacted before his mind could, and like a frenzied panther, he lunged forward, reaching out to grab Myra Lynn's arm. He couldn't let her leave. He had to bring her back, just as his calloused fingers were about to touch Myra Lynn's arm. Myra Lynn seemed to have eyes on the back of her head. Her steps didn't falter in the slightest, nor did she even turn around. The hand that had been lightly supporting Professor Ju dropped naturally to her side, then slipped into the faded canvas bag's side pocket. Then, with a slight flick of her wrist, an object traced a brief, icy silver arc under the dim streetlight, accompanied by a faint whistling sound, flying straight toward Ezra Gu's face with deadly precision. Ezra Gu instinctively reached out to grab it. The object felt cold and hard in his hand. With the distinctive weight of metal, he reflexively opened his palm. Under the dim yellow glow of the streetlight, the object in his hand was clearly illuminated. A pen, a Hero brand fountain pen. The body is coated in the familiar dark green lacquer. From prolonged use, the gold plating on the cap's edge has worn off, revealing a dull copper color. On the clip, a tiny GZ is engraved, the initials of his name. This was awarded to him personally by the regimental commander after he distinguished himself on the Lausanne front line. He once treasured it immensely, but later, it seems after an argument, Myra Lynn, her eyes red, took it from him, saying she wanted to keep it as a memento. And now, this old pen, which carried the weight of bygone years and what he thought was some kind of sentimental attachment, was casually tossed back to him as if it were trash. The cold metal pressed against his palm, its chill piercing to the bone. Ezra Gu seemed to have been struck by a paralysis spell, freezing abruptly in place. All movement, all his roars, all his fury and panic were utterly frozen in that moment. His bloodshot eyes fixed unblinkingly on the worn old pen in his palm, as though he were seeing it clearly for the first time. The faded gold plating, the dull lacquer, like a cruel mirror. It vividly reflected the self-deluded past he had clung to and the wretched present he now faced. The sound of Myra Lynn supporting Professor Ju as they walked away had already faded into the bright lights and shadows of the laboratory building. Only he remained, standing alone under the dim yellow street lamp at the school gate, like a complete and utter joke abandoned by the world. The night wind blew, rustling a few fallen leaves on the ground, creating a soft, whispering sound. Ezra Gu slowly, very slowly, closed his hand, the cold, old fountain pen pressed tightly against his palm, the pain searing into his very soul. He lowered his head, staring at the cold metallic glint in his palm. The street lamp pinned his long, solitary shadow onto the icy concrete ground. Like an abandoned statue slowly weathering away, that cold Herobrand pen felt like a scorching bullet shell, wedged mercilessly into Ezra Gu's palm. The dim yellow light blurred the worn marks on the pen's surface. Yet the engraved letters GZ burned vividly onto his retinas, stinging his eyes with pain. Myra Lynn, you, he wanted to roar, to demand answers, to rush forward and seize that resolute figure disappearing into the shadows of the laboratory building, but his throat felt clogged with sandpaper, only able to emit broken, voiceless gasps. His outstretched hand froze mid-air, fingertips retaining the phantom touch of her sleeve brushing past, a cold so sharp it pierced to the bone. The bright glass windows of the lab building resembled indifferent eyes, reflecting his current wretchedness. An utterly expelled, insignificant obstacle from her world. The occasional passing students cast curious yet wary glances, their hushed whispers like fine needles pricking at his proud military dignity. "Excuse me, I'm rushing lab data." That calm, almost cruel voice echoed in his ears over and over. No hysteria. No bitter accusations. Just an icy indifference that had completely erased him from her life. She couldn't even be bothered to waste a shred of emotion on him anymore. A tremendous, unprecedented panic seized Ezra Gu's heart, worse than staring down the barrel of a gun. Only then did he truly realize. The Myra Lynn who had once obediently waited in the family quarters, cooked for him, and been told to be understanding of everyone, that Myra Lynn was truly dead. She had died on the cold operating table, in the cup of hypocritical brown sugar water he'd handed her, and at the bottom of the high-rise where Lena Liu had pushed her. The one alive now was Capital Medical University's Myra Lynn, the top science student Myra Lynn. Her world consisted solely of cold lab data, rigorous academic debates, and a future he could neither comprehend nor hope to reach. And he, Ezra Gu, a young battalion commander who had just been awarded a third-class merit and had a promising future, became a complete joke in her eyes, in front of her Professor Ju, and in the bright world she was running toward. A suppressed, almost dying beast-like gasp escaped from the depths of his chest. He clenched his fist abruptly, the hard cap of the old pen digging deep into the flesh of his palm, bringing a sharp sting. Strangely, this pain dulled the more overwhelming, more desperate tearing sensation in his heart. He couldn't collapse here, not like a discarded, resentful husband, losing his composure at the gates of this sacred institution. Ezra Gu forced himself to straighten his back, which had momentarily hunched. The military discipline ingrained in his bones kicked in at this moment, though it flickered like a candle in the wind. Slowly, with extreme stiffness, he turned around and took heavy steps, his legs feeling as if they were filled with lead. Step by step, leaving behind the area bathed in streetlight yet chilling him to the bone. Each step felt like treading on burning coals. Behind her, the brightly lit laboratory building cast glaring light from another world. Capital Medical University, girls' dormitory, under the dim glow of a desk lamp. Myra Lynn spread open the hefty pathophysiology, where densely packed notes on the pages served as her weapons against forgetting and time. The tip of her pen scratched softly against the paper. Steady and focused, the dorm was quiet, save for the faint rustling of pages turned by her roommate. Myra Lynn, a lively Beijing girl with a ponytail from the clinical bunk, leaned over and whispered, "That man downstairs just now, the one in the Zhongshan suit who looked really stern. He was looking for you, wasn't he? Do you know him?" Myra Lynn's pen tip didn't pause, her gaze still fixed on the intricate pathological mechanism diagram, her voice flat and unemotional, as if stating a fact that had nothing to do with her. An insignificant person from the past. From the past, the girl grew even more curious. From the looks of it, he seemed like a soldier. His aura was terrifying, as if he wanted to devour someone. Myra Lynn finally raised her head, the dim light casting faint shadows on her slender face. The corners of her lips curved ever so slightly upward, but the smile held no warmth, only a trace of worldly detachment and a barely perceptible hint of mockery. Used to be a soldier," she paused, her gaze sweeping over the heavy night outside the window, then added in a voice as light as a feather falling to the ground, "A soldier, who was used to giving orders." She didn't say another word, lowering her head again and immersing herself back into the world of her book, as if the encounter at the school gate, one that could shatter all the dignity of a proud man, had merely been a wisp of wind brushing the water's surface, leaving not even a ripple behind. Her roommate, looking at her calm profile, inexplicably felt a chill and shrank her neck slightly, wisely choosing not to press further. *** military district, Ezra Gu's dormitory. The room was thick with the heavy scent of tobacco. The curtains were tightly drawn, shutting out the outside light. Ezra Gu didn't turn on the lamp, merely leaning against the cold wall, a few twisted cigarette butts scattered at his feet, the crimson embers flickering in the darkness. He clutched the Hero brand fountain pen tightly in his hand, his knuckles turning white from the strain. The cold metal had long been warmed by his body heat, yet it still couldn't dispel the bone-deep chill in his heart. Myra Lynn, Myra Lynn. He murmured the name unconsciously, his voice hoarse and dry. Before his eyes flashed the resolute look in her eyes as she pulled out the 4 and signed the divorce papers in the hospital bed. The indifference in her voice as she calmly said "excuse me" while supporting the professor at the school gate, the serene yet unfamiliar face in the newspaper, along with the glaring words "top science student" and "Capital Medical University." He was wrong, terribly wrong, wrong, beyond redemption. What understanding, what bigger picture, what "it's not easy for a widow with orphans." All were just fig leaves he used to cover up his own cowardice and favoritism. It was his own hands that, through repeated acts of understanding, pushed the woman who had given him her whole heart into an icy abyss, and then personally extinguished her last glimmer of hope. He thought she couldn't live without him. As a result, he left her, and even his soul could find no place to return. Thud, a muffled sound. It was the sound of a fist slamming hard onto the unyielding concrete floor. The excruciating pain in his knuckles was nothing compared to the agony in his heart. In the darkness, Ezra Gu's bloodshot eyes stared fixedly into the void. Within them surged towering waves of regret, mingled with the fury of being utterly rejected and abandoned. Ultimately settling into a silent despair, he grabbed the opened bottle of strong liquor from the floor and tilted his head back. Gulping it down fiercely, the burning liquid scorched his throat, making him cough violently as tears welled up reflexively. He didn't care, clutching it like a lifeline, drinking even more desperately, trying to numb his shattered heart with the searing pain. I don't know how much time had passed when the wine bottle rolled to the ground, emitting a hollow sound. Ezra Gu's tall frame was curled up in the cold corner, his head buried deep in the crook of his arm, his shoulders shaking uncontrollably, suppressed, wounded animal-like sobs echoed faintly in the deathly silent room. No tears, only broken, desperate wails rising from his throat. **** Cotton Mill Residential Area, Lin Dayoung's home. ***. Under the dim yellow light bulb, Lin Dayoung carefully placed a brand new remittance slip beneath the glass tabletop, next to a photo of Myra Lin in a white lab coat, taken at the entrance of the medical school. In the photo, his younger sister's eyes were bright, her smile serene yet full of strength. "Brother, this month's allowance has come in. I've sent you half. Don't skimp, eat well and buy what you need. Everything's fine here. The professor thinks highly of me and even let me join an important research project." The letter bore Myra Lin's neat, strong handwriting. Lin Dayoung's rough fingers traced over his sister's face in the photo, then brushed against the money order. His clouded eyes glistened as a simple, honest smile spread across his lips. He walked to the doorway, took a deep breath of the cold, coal smoke-laden night air, and felt a surge of energy coursing through him. Next door, Lena Liu's shrill cries and curses mingled with the wails of a child, punctuated by words like "ungrateful wretch," "heartless," and "serves you right." Ever since Myra Lin got into university and news of Ezra Gu's divorce spread, Lena Liu's life had taken a turn for the worse. Though the theft of food coupons and a watch never made it to court, the scandal was common knowledge in the factory's residential compound. Where gossip could drown a person, the Jiyu family had cut all ties with her. Even taking away Jijun, now she was truly alone, her reputation in tatters, scraping by on meager earnings as a street sweeper for the factory, her bitterness growing by the day. Lin Dayoung listened to the hysterical shrieking, spat in disdain, and slammed the door shut, blocking out the nauseating noise. He hummed a tuneless little ditty, carefully scooping a bit of lard from the tin can, ready to fry himself an egg to celebrate his sister sending money home again. The firelight reflected off his dark, honest face, warm and reassuring. In the brightly lit laboratory of Capital Medical University, Myra Lin, dressed in a pristine white lab coat, was intently adjusting the microscope's focus. In her field of vision, the microscopic world was both magnificent and precise, brimming with unsolved mysteries. Outside the window, the biting chill of early spring in 1984 lingered, yet it couldn't dispel the fervent thirst for knowledge within those walls. Her journey had only just begun. On that path, the shadow once named Ezra Gu was no longer there.